Hello, friends. Welcome to a surprise midday episode of Kirk Your Enthusiasm here on Pod Maverick. I am Kirk Henderson, and today I am joined by what I have termed in the past as my internet friend, Tim Bontemps of ESPN. I met Tim several years ago at a summer league function where people would do like podcasting live shows and things like that, and have obviously followed his work at ESPN for years. Tim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Kirk. How are you doing, man?
I am okay. I am kind of delighted in the fact that I've not had to watch basketball for several days, which makes the actual watching of basketball a lot more enjoyable.
Yes.
So, well, this conversation came about as a result of all of us getting ridiculously riled up about the MVP race, because why would we do anything else as basketball fans? That's right. So I kind of threw together a list of questions. You know, normally it's just me and my co-host kind of reacting to games, and I've not actually interviewed somebody that wasn't Josh in several months, so I'm a little off.
That's all right. We'll get through it. I'll help you through it.
So one of the things that has vexed me before we get to the MVP stuff, I think that like kind of the current content landscape makes people a little bit insane in terms of how they consume things, and so with your job as like a beat writer, what currently would you kind of describe as like the best parts of your job?
It's an interesting question. I mean, honestly, I grew up on a farm. This is going to sound like a very hokey answer.
No, I want to hear this. This is what we want to hear.
I grew up on a farm. I grew up on a farm in Western New York State, on a dairy farm, and in college I worked at an aluminum dock and ladder shop to help pay my way through college. And this isn't really work, you know? So like, I like all parts of my job. I mean, I love going to games. I was in Philly for this incredible display that was the Heat Sixers game. I wouldn't say it was a great game. It was a great game, but it wasn't a great game to watch, I guess, is probably the best way to describe it, right? It was a ugly, in the mud, typical Game 7 kind of game where it's, you know, a nasty rock'em sock'em robots kind of game, and you have to just sort of summon something to get through it. And like being in the arena for any game, but especially games this time of year, it's the best thing, because you get a chance to see people competing at the highest level and see both sides. Like that game, it felt like a Game 7, even in the locker rooms. Like obviously Miami does not think its season's over, but the Heat knew the opportunity they had in front of them if they won, and the Sixers knew the opportunity they were staring in the face if they lost. And so, you know, that is probably the single best part of the job, is sort of getting a chance to see up close kind of the human emotional roller coaster that is being around these NBA teams on a daily basis. But I still love writing a lot. I love digging into something and telling stories. It's been a fun challenge at ESPN. I didn't have any television training when I was in school. I went to St. Bonaventure. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to write for a newspaper and cover a team. So it was a big challenge for me when I came here to, you know, really try to learn how to do the TV stuff. That's been a super fun challenge to do. And obviously it's, you know, it's fun to hear from family and friends when they see you on SportsCenter and stuff. So doing the pod with Brian and Wendy is great. One of my favorite things to do every week is talk with those guys a couple hours about hoops. So I love my job. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I know it sounds hokey, but I feel very fortunate to get to do it, as opposed to having a day-to-day job where I just go home and watch hoops afterward.
No, it's because I have a day-to-day job, and as we were briefly talking beforehand, it can sometimes suck. And so I like hearing that people still are very much enthused by their jobs.
I've always tried to have the Bob Ryan philosophy of being thrilled to have the opportunity to go to games. And I've long said, if I get to the point where I don't feel like going to basketball games anymore, I will try to find something else to do.
Well,
Because there's a lot of people who would love to go to basketball games for a job, and I feel very fortunate to do so.
My co-host Josh, he's out of media, but he went to college to do reporting for a living. And his first year, he was writing about the Mavericks while also covering like local high school football. And the grind almost put him in the hospital, because I think fans sort of misunderstand just how much, when the season is on, you are working all the time. You're never really not working. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm digging ditches, but
Well,
yeah, it's. I mean, look, it's the NBA. I mean, anyone listening to the pod knows, like, the NBA season's crazy. Like, there's just it doesn't really end, and there's crazy stuff going on all the time. So, you know, it makes for a very fun and interesting and not boring professional life, which is what I would say is the best way to describe it.
With that out there, and we're eventually going to get to the MVP and Maverick stuff. But what do fans most misunderstand about being a beat writer? Because I mean, I see the stuff that people say about you and McMahon. Like, McMahon gets endless grief around Dallas. I'm like, it's not his job to be any of these guys' PR. Like, he's supposed to irritate them a little bit with questions.
Yeah, I would say the general thing people don't understand is that we don't work for the team.
Right.
Like, there are people that work for the teams that do media, and then there's people that don't. Like, you know, our job is to analyze what we see and give opinions on it, and write about what we, you know, talk to people and report what's going on. And doesn't always mean people are going to appreciate what I have to say or they're going to agree with it. But what I would say is, in general, and I know Tim does the same thing, I think we both are very down the middle in terms of the fact that if we think something, we're going to say it, and people might not like it or agree with it. But if you consistently show that you are going to be consistently fair in terms of if you just say, hey, this is what I think about something, whether you like it or not, I think people in the league respect that. And I think that generally fans do too. And, you know, like you said, the job of a fan is to root for their team. So I can understand why I don't think the Mavs are going to win a series or whatever. They don't like a free agent signing or a trade or whatever. Like, I can totally understand why fans would get upset, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's all part of the game.
Okay, so before we get into the some of the meat that I know people were here for related to the MVP discussion, I want to ask the viewers who are listening right now and watching, if you could go down and click the like button. If you could also consider subscribing while you're down there. As you guys know, Josh and I record after every game. And then, now that it's playoffs, I'm definitely going to be having the secondary live shows where you all can join and, you know, give your takes and talk a little basketball with me till the wee hours of the night. Though I am delighted by this Dallas Mavericks Clippers schedule. It allows me to watch games during the day and not. I could have sworn the Mavericks were going to get all these West Coast time slots. Just would have.
Well, they got very lucky. They got very lucky, I think, with the way that the game on Tuesday played. I should say the games on Tuesday played out, because you got lucky, I should say, because it probably doesn't matter to them. But if the Lakers had lost, or if the Warriors had won, and there was a chance of them being in the 1-8 game against Oklahoma City, I suspect that game would have been playing Sunday afternoon as opposed to playing it at Sunday night at 9:30, which is
right. That was what I expected. That was really what I expected. So I'm pretty pleased with that.
Yeah, it worked out great. It's going to be a super fun afternoon.
I love it. And so, you know, Josh and I will be recording those two shows live after every game. You guys should set your notifications to where you can join us and talk a little basketball. This first weekend coming up is quite literally the best basketball weekend of the year for me. I love it. There's just basketball on all the time. Can't wait to look forward to it. Tim and I will be right back after I insert some ads, though everybody watching on the video won't have to deal with that. That'll be for the audio only folks. Okay, now that we're through some of the questions that I kind of had, I know that we have a lot of Mavericks fans have asked me that kind of questions that they would like to get answered. And the first one,
Sure.
The first one for me is so how does this MVP voting pool even work? Who gets chosen, and do people get kind of rotated out?
Are you talking about the straw poll or the actual
both
voting?
Let's actually do both is kind of where
Okay.
I'm going, because the straw poll is your kind of content baby that generates probably the most angry arguments on the internet on a week-to-week basis. It's really quite impressive.
Yeah. So we'll start with my straw poll. So because I can only somewhat speak to the NBA pool.
Sure.
So I came up with this in 2016-17 when I was still at the Washington Post, when there was a 4-horse race for MVP between James Harden, Russell Westbrook, LeBron James, and Kawhi Leonard. And I didn't have a vote at the time, but it was a great race. Russ ended up winning, averaged a triple-double, had the crazy clutch games at the end. And I ended up saying, hey, it'd be interesting just to see what people think. So I remember how people I asked 60, 70, something. I didn't ask any sort of, I just asked a bunch of people, what do you think? And then over time, when I got to ESPN, I brought it to ESPN and eventually tried to make it as scientific a process as possible. So it's not the exact same pool of voters as the ultimate list of 100 people the NBA sends it out to, but I go through and ask 100 people, some from overseas, because there's some international voters in the NBA voting awards pool. I try to get 2 people from every market. I just about always do. Sometimes it might be 1, but try to get a local representation from across the board like the NBA does. And then I ask a bunch of national people. And it's just the way all it is at 3 points in the year, about a third of the way through, halfway through the year, and then 2/3 of the way or 3/4 of the way through, where does the race stand right now? And I think when you ask, what do people misunderstand about things? I think what people misunderstand in particular about the straw poll, there's 2 things. One, I'm just literally asking people to tell me right now off the top of their head who they think they're going to vote for. It's not, right. I'm not saying to anyone, hey, Jokic has 70 votes. You might want to consider that. Right? It's just, what do you think? Because a lot of the time, all year, we spend time saying, oh, this guy's going to win MVP. This guy's going to win MVP. This guy's going to win MVP. And there's just not a lot of I just thought it would be an interesting way to sort of say to people, hey, here's where the race actually stands.
Because we talk about it all the time. MVP, it's 15 games in. That's why I'm really grateful for the end-season tournament, is because that didn't happen this year. It was game 35-40 when we finally started talking about this.
Well, people care for a reason, right? It's a big deal. It's a big deal to win MVP. It's a big deal to win MVP 2 or 3 times in a row. It's a big, there's a reason. I think the only guy who's probably never going to go to the Hall of Fame who's won MVP is Derrick Rose.
Yeah.
Right? If you win an MVP, you're basically a Hall of Famer. So, I totally get why it's a big deal. There's a reason why I think it's a good thing to do. People do care about it. Mm-hmm. But the other thing I would say is, this year, for example, right? There were a lot of people who said, I'm not really sure. I have Jokic ahead of Luka or Jokic ahead of Shea, but it's really close. And I think where people, lose track of polling in particular is it's sort of like the electoral. I'm not turning this to a politics discussion, but it's sort of like the electoral college, where Joe Biden in the last election won a handful of states by a small margin.
Yep.
So the electoral college win was pretty big, right? And if you're choosing between, say, Jokic and Luka, if you have 50 people think, man, it's really tight, but I'm going to give a slight edge to Jokic, whether it's because of what happened in the playoffs, whether it's because they have a better record, or it's because they think he's a better, whatever the reason, right? If 40 of those 50 people give a slight edge to Jokic, he wins 40 of the 50 votes. And it's oh, man, Jokic just absolutely wiped the floor with Luka in this voting. Mm-hmm. When really it's 30 people decided to tip a little bit in one direction. You know what I mean? Because it's not like it's not like the vote is you give a guy a score from 1 to 10. And it's I can give one guy a 10 and one guy a 9.5. It's it's a binary thing. You're either picking somebody first or you're picking somebody second. Yeah. And so I think sometimes when people see the final voting totals, in the last straw poll, it's oh man, how does Jokic have 85 first place votes? It was like, well, he's slightly ahead on everybody's ballot. And so everybody sort of leaned that way. And so it seems like he's a million miles ahead. You know what I mean? Even if the race is not, if that's not perfectly indicative of the actual, like how close the actual race is. If that makes sense.
It does. And I have a little bit of a convoluted question. So I'm going to see if I can phrase it in a way that makes sense.
I'm happy to answer questions about it. It's like I lay out exactly how this thing is. So I don't want people to think it's some like secretive process. And I also think, frankly, it has absolutely zero bearing on the MVP race.
Well, I mean,
I find it kind of amusing that that's become a thing this year. Like last year, Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid were literally tied in the last poll. You know what I mean? So
right.
like, it didn't end that way. Like, so I don't think voters are like, oh man, Bontemps said that Jokic is going to win, so I better not make sure he looks wrong. I better not vote for somebody else. Like, I just don't think that's the case.
Well, so the Action Network's Matt Moore, eternally online HP basketball, gets as deep.
Our guy, he is as online as anybody on the earth.
On Earth. Well, and I had to give my listeners a bit of a what for the other day, because I was like, I guarantee you Matt Moore is the only MVP voter who will get online and argue with you specifically as a person, because nobody else will do that.
No, he will for sure.
One of the things he's done is he's talked to me about how like there's almost always, at least recently, a consolidation of votes around one particular candidate, even if there is a tightness of the race. And so the first part of my question is like, do you think like MVP voting, not your straw poll, like the MVP voting in general, should it be public, or is private better for kind of what we're talking about here? Because your four-person race in 2016 that you mentioned, like that was a close race, and I can't remember what the votes were. It ultimately doesn't matter in the end. But I'm sort of a fan, at least in terms of a discussion and talking about basketball as a whole, of a little bit of a variety. So it's like if Jokic is going to win this year, I sort of feel like the Electoral College example is a pretty good one, where I sort of feel like he's going to get like 60% of the vote overall, and then three candidates are going to split the remaining 40%. Whereas I bet, realistically, when we take a look at voting once it comes in, I sort of think it's going to be overwhelming in Jokic's favor the way it turned out in your straw poll. So it's like, do you think private voting would help with that sort of thing? Or are we just kind of overthinking it, talking about it too much because everybody in basketball likes to argue about everything?
I mean, I think some of it's latter, honestly. I also don't know if it would particularly make a huge difference, because my poll's always anonymous. I never say to anybody who voted for anybody. Mm-hmm. Like some people will say, hey, I voted in Tim's thing and I said X, right? Yep. But I don't make a list and say, here's who everybody voted for. And it's more or less been the same as the public one, a little bit different, but relatively the same, right? So I think more than anything, it's just that the way this shakes out, like the last few years, it's sort of become kind of a binary choice, and it's down to one guy or another. And so, like I said, if 7 out of 10 people go in one direction and it's a 2-choice race, it looks like a lopsided race. Mm-hmm. When in reality, it's not. Like, I don't think Joel Embiid won in a landslide last year, but I think it was like 65-35 or 70-30.
He pulled ahead those last 20 games. He really did.
But I'm saying it went from roughly 50-50 to 65-35 or 70-30. So out of the 100 people, 20 changed their mind. That's what I mean, right? Like you're not talking about a huge margin here, really. And I think last year, like some of this comes down to storyline. I'm not saying people think about it this way, but like it's the natural reaction of it. And last year, what was everybody saying the whole time? Man, Nikola Jokic got a chance to be the 4th guy ever to win 3 MVPs in a row with Wilt Chamberlain, Larry Bird, and Bill Russell, right? And I think there was sort of always going to be a hesitancy to put Nikola Jokic in the same category as Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, and Larry Bird until he had a playoff run like he did last year.
Sure.
So that kind of stuff is going to factor into people's minds. Like it just is. Whether you want to argue it should or shouldn't or whatever, I think that's the case. Just like I think this year, because I saw a question here somewhere saying, why did I say months ago I didn't think Luka was going to win? I didn't think Luka was going to win, not because of anything to do with Luka, but if he was coming off the run they had 2 years ago into this season, he would have had a lot more momentum early on, and he wouldn't have had to make up quite as much ground.
Well,
ultimately,
I'm rather surprised that wasn't more of the narrative. I mean, he didn't want to sit that the Mavericks didn't make the playoffs. I mean, he didn't want to sit. I think.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, and I don't mean.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say I don't necessarily think a lot of people per se blamed Luka. I'm not saying it was Luka's fault, right? Like but the Mavericks had a very disappointing end of last season, and that kind of stuff just sort of naturally carries over into these kind of discussions. Whereas, look, I think Dallas is going to win this first round series. If Dallas makes the conference finals this year or has a great 7-game series with the Thunder, presumably in the second round, I think Luka's going to go into next season as the favorite to win MVP because he's sort of the next guy up to win. I think he's going to finish second in the MVP voting. I voted for him second. And I think he's got a great chance to win the award. And it's going to all be set up for him to have a big year, for Dallas to be really good, and for him to win MVP. And that's sort of how this stuff goes. You see people finish second. James Harden, right? He finished second a couple times, was close. Houston had good years, and then he broke through and won. Joel Embiid finished second a couple times, close ballots, broke through and won. I think, Jokic finished second. I think he was fourth. He didn't quite have the same thing because Denver sort of exploded the first year. Or he exploded and then Embiid got hurt. But I do think this sets up for this to be a battle between probably Luka and Shea next year. And I think Luka would be in front to win an MVP award. And I'll be pretty stunned if sometime in the next 2 to 3 years that Luka doesn't win one. Maybe multiple.
Well, and that's what Matt Moore has also told me, at least in terms of preseason betting. And you sort of mentioned this to me when we were chatting prior, is what voters want, really what betting public wants too, is the betting public very much wants Luka to win the MVP. That's why he's been the preseason MVP favorite for 3 straight years. So there's a lot of people that think he could be MVP playing the right way. And with this, the Jokic conversation, and I'm gonna drive my Mavs fans crazy with this, but like Jokic is in the middle of a 4-year run that we're going to look back on and go, what in the hell did we watch?
I mean, that's the other thing here. Like, and just to clarify, because somebody asked in there that the Luka didn't start slowly. I meant that Dallas was in the play-in mix. It's just very hard to win MVP if your team is in the play-in mix. Doesn't mean it's impossible.
Punch out. Because we saw this with Dirk's MVP year. They played at one point in 2007. They went 52-4. So you do that, and you're just going to lead. And the Mavericks started out 8-2, and then they played 500 basketball for 40 games. That's what happened.
Yes, and they were mired in the play-in mix, and it was like, well, are they going to actually that was where my comment came from earlier in the year. Like he was playing great, but Dallas was going to have to make a big run, and look, Dallas did make a big run, which is why he went from being fourth to being second. But we're also talking about. Like Nikola Jokic is in the middle of an unbelievable run. He's coming off of a fantastic playoffs. Like it's not a shame to lose the MVP to Nikola Jokic.
Nope.
Like that's where this whole discussion sort of gets fraught for me in general. Not like this one, but the MVP discussion in general. Because like Shea is a worthy MVP this year. Luka's a worthy MVP this year. Jokic is a worthy MVP this year. You could argue Giannis is a worthy MVP this year, though he's going to pretty clearly finish fourth. Like those guys all had unbelievable seasons. So it's not like one guy deserves it and one guy doesn't. But at some point you have to pick somebody.
Yeah.
And so Jokic is probably going to win by a small amount. But
that would be if the votes come out and it's actually interesting in relative, because you're in your last drop.
Well, when I say a small amount, I mean that I think he'll probably have a good amount of the first place votes, but that I don't think it's going to be like everybody was like rubber stamp
90,
Jokic.
10,
I didn't think about
something
it.
like that.
Like even if it is 90-10, I think people thought about the vote and then they might ultimately vote for him. But this wasn't a unanimous MVP where it's like no doubt. Like when Steph won unanimous MVP, there was no doubt everybody was voting for Steph. Or the year LeBron got all but one vote. Like LeBron was the MVP of the league. There was no doubt about it. And like Jokic is going to win, but everybody kind of thought about it.
Well,
like there was a real debate with people. Hey, should I vote for Luka? Should I vote for Shea? Like that, like it wasn't. That's when I say like whatever the actual number is at the end. Same with the straw poll, because I ask everybody and they tell me like, hey, I was really torn. I ultimately chose to go one way or the other. And like Jokic is probably going to win a lot of those, but that's what I mean. Like people spend a lot of, I guess the thing I would say, everybody who has a vote spends a lot of time thinking about what they're going to do. Yeah. It's not like people are just like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. I'll do it in 3 seconds and be done with it. Like the people who get votes care about it and they spend time thinking about it and talk about it and sort of agonize over it, because everybody does understand it's a important thing and players really care and fans care and it matters for legacies. And so you spend a lot of time talking about it and thinking about it, not just because it's an interesting topic, but because like as somebody who votes, like I do care about making sure I get it as right as I can get it and feel good about what I end up doing.
Well, and to pivot, because I told you I wouldn't keep you past 30 minutes. One of the things that I
got some time if you want to chat longer. We're good.
I'm sort of looking forward to is I think Luka needs to be motivated. I don't know if we all know this. Luka's about to win his be placed on his 5th straight All NBA first team in his first 6 years. The man has accomplished as much. I keep telling our fans this. They don't a lot of people forget it's not the NBA Hall of Fame. It's a basketball Hall of Fame. Luka could be Thanos snaps now and would go into the Hall of Fame as
yes. Luka's really, 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 really good. Like he's awesome.
This isn't.
I feel like Mavs fans think I hate Luka because I said Shea is in the same ballpark as him whenever it was a year ago, which I stand by. They're 2 of the 5 best players in the league, and that I think Jokic is going to win MVP. Like I think Luka's unbelievable. I thought in the draft 6 years ago he should have been the number 1 pick easily. Thought it was crazy that he wasn't the number 1 pick, and he's been an unbelievable player all the way through. Like he's had a remarkable career. Well, and like you said, we're barely into it.
I'm kind of okay with I'm not kind of okay. I gave up on the MVP stuff a while ago because I just don't care that much. I care much more about the playoffs and winning the team that I root for winning a championship. And I think that any little edge benefits a guy like Luka because he is so unbelievably good at basketball. He can do the Larry Bird thing, the Michael Jordan thing, where he needs to find stuff to get irritated at. And he'll probably never say it, but if not winning the MVP bothers him, all the good, go out and go scorched earth. And that sort of leads to the last thing I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
This Clippers Mavericks series. It's so funny. There's numerous commentators out in the public, and I've seen this, who seem to think that the Mavericks won one of these 2 playoff matchups. The Mavericks are 0-2 against the Clippers. Now, granted, by game 3 of the series, Luka will have played 50% of his playoff basketball against the Clippers. It's preposterous.
Yes.
It'll be 15 games against the Clippers. And I just don't know how to feel about this series. A guy earlier in the chat noted that Shams has reported that Kawhi Leonard will play in game 1. And I just don't know what to think about this series because I still have a healthy fear of the team that boasts 2 former MVPs and multiple all NBA players that are all going, like almost all 4 of them may go into the Hall of Fame one day. That's how talented the Clippers are. So what do you think about this series?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Dallas is going to win if for no other reason than I can't know for sure how Kawhi is going to make it through the series, right? Like if Kawhi is fully healthy and if James Harden's fully healthy, I might give a slight edge to the Clippers. I think it's a toss-up series, but I'm picking Dallas by default because I just don't know what those guys are going to look like. And if the series is that close and there's major injury questions on one side, I'm going to take the side where everybody's relatively healthy. So I think it's going to be a great series. I'm excited to see how Dallas looks in the series. There's some fascinating cross matches across the board. There's not really great options to guard Paul George and Kawhi on the Mavs, really. It's going to be interesting to see, especially with Luka and Kyrie out there as 2 of the guys guarding people. How is that going to go? On the other hand, are they going to, if Kawhi's healthy, are they going to have him on one of these 2 guys for a lot of the series? Mm-hmm. Paul George probably has to guard Kyrie Irving a lot. That's going to be a fascinating matchup. Terrence Mann, who has quite a history with Luka, probably will spend a lot of time on him. That will be fun to watch.
That's underrated. It's underrated how much Luka does not like that man.
Yes, he really doesn't. And that's going to be that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And but I do think ultimately that I do think Dallas wins. I like their depth a little more. I do think that, and again, more than anything, it just comes down to, I know the best player. You want to argue between Kawhi and Luka. I think it's a fair argument who's the best player in the series if they're both fully healthy and operational, right? Maybe Kawhi will play. Maybe Kawhi will be incredible. Or maybe he won't. Like, I don't know. So I don't know how you could go into this series and pick the Clippers to win if you don't actually know whether this guy is going to play. Mm-hmm. So I think Dallas is going to win, which would set up another incredible series in the second round, presumably with Oklahoma City, which would be, for all the stuff we were just talking about, the MVP race and with Shea and Luka and everything else, like that would be an incredible series. And I would be really excited about it. And I hope we get to see it because I think that would have the chance to be a really, really exciting series that would have a lot at stake. And it's got a potential to be especially if Luka's in Dallas for a while, it's not like Oklahoma City's going anywhere. Like that's got a chance to be a, 5, 6, 7 year battle, those are the kind of things that make the NBA great when you have matchups like that over and over and over again. So sort of the same thing with the Clippers thing, right? Like it's crazy how often they've had to play, but when you play a team like this over and over and over again in the playoffs, it develops a lot of animosity and history and stuff to refer back to. And, it's what makes the playoffs great. It's really, I'm really excited to see how this one shakes out.
It's a low-key, unbelievably interesting coaching matchup because Ty Lue is widely regarded as a great coach, and yet he seems to coach down to who he's coaching against. And then there's Jason Kidd, who is widely regarded as kind of a meh coach, but he has stretches. I posted this statistic, but it's he in February, March, and April of 2022 and 2024, he boasts a winning percentage above 75%. Every other month, the Mavericks play just above 500 basketball. So it's like if somebody could set Jason Kidd's calendar to eternally March even number year, maybe he might coach a good series. I don't know. So I'm really fascinated to see because I think the Clippers may go small because I think they have to. But if the Mavericks' strength has come from their size and really just quietly, they have really benefited from the rule changes. The Mavericks maul people. It is 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And I can't believe that the Mavericks are a physical basketball team in my lifetime. It has never happened. I've watched so much soft basketball, and this is just it's like the high school coach in me is super enthused by how physical this is.
No, it's great. And by the way, I saw Gallagher's comment. I laughed a lot at his rant about the straw poll. So we're all good, Jason. Don't worry about it. Look, it has been impressive to see how Dallas has turned things around. And listen, I stand by my comments at the trade deadline. I do not like the value proposition of trading the first round assets in the future for a borderline starting power forward and a guy who's a borderline starter, probably elite backup center, right? Like
that's my take.
Long term,
I shared this. Yeah.
Long term concerns. Short term, Dallas is better, and you're right. They have benefited from the rule changes. The thing people don't like, Mavs fans watch Luka all the time. The people that I think are surprised by Luka don't realize how big he is and how strong he is. And like he can absorb a lot of contact. And I know Luka needs to chill with the refs, and I understand he thinks he's fouled every time. But he's been better. His size is he's
been better because now he's fouling the crap out of everyone. So I think
that's true. I mean, maybe he might talk a little less. He still talks way too much, but that size and physicality, especially in the playoffs, it's a huge deal, right? Because it's hard to win with small guards or small players. And when you have a guy of Luka's size and skill with the ball, there's a reason he's always great in the playoffs, right? He's going to be able to get his shot off in any situation against anybody. And they are really well set to make a deep run. And, they have sort of, in a lot of ways, recreated the team from a couple of years ago with Kyrie and the Brunson role, and sort of everything else is kind of the same. And like that's a formula that can really get buckets in the playoffs and can win playoff games. And, it won't surprise me if Dallas loses in this series, because it's a really close series, especially if Kawhi's healthy. And it won't surprise me if they win 2 rounds and are in the conference finals against Denver. Like, it's all variables are in play. And that's why I really love the playoffs in the next couple of months every year, because you get teams in the crucible and they have to figure out how to beat each other and go through it. And you learn so much about the players involved and the teams involved. And like you said, coaching, all that stuff, like everything gets laid bare in the playoffs, and all your weaknesses get exposed, all your strengths get emphasized. You figure out who's got what it takes to advance. And it's when you really learn about teams and players. And Luka certainly delivered time and again in the playoffs. I certainly expect him to again this spring. And the Mavs are one of the more interesting teams in the league over the next couple months because of the path they potentially have in front of them. And as we know, there's a lot of stuff at stake over the next couple of years in terms of whether Luka wants to stay, what direction he feels like the franchise is going in, all that kind of stuff. And they're losing in the first round in another tight series to the Clippers, or going to the conference finals, is a big, I'm not saying it's going to determine his future, but like, you feel dramatically different about this season depending on which way that goes.
That's true.
It's just hard to argue that,
No. Kids putting out coaching extension feelers, which I think is just hysterical. And I'm like, if you lose in the first round, Bucko, I don't think we're going to be having that talk. Anyway, Tim, I've taken up way, way too much of your time during the busiest point of your year. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, very happy to do it. Thanks for having me. And good luck to the Mavs in the playoffs.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. Josh Bowe and I will be back at 9:30 tonight previewing Mavs Clippers. I have no idea what we're going to talk about because I have not created a rundown. I'll do that sometime between now and then. Please go ahead and notify on your pod stream for that. Anybody listening on the audio feed, that both these shows will be posted, I don't know, at least 12 hours apart. But thanks so much for listening. And once again, thank you to Tim Bontemps for joining us. Everybody have a great rest of your Thursday and enjoy this weekend of basketball. Go Mavs.